starring Joyce Heiser, Sherilyn Fenn, Lee McCloskey of Dallas and many other things, and William Zabka, the guy everybody loved to hate as your generic high school bully slash jerk in the 80s. 1985, Just One of the Guys.
I talked to her. She screamed at me. Everything was great. Now she's wearing my clothes. Hey, who do you think you are, Tootsie?
I actually decided to revisit this movie based on a rather ridiculous article from an online rag that I won't bother to mention its name, because all of a sudden it was like so much of the great art of the past being plugged as somehow something to do with transgenderism and modern intersectionalism and all of this nonsense. Just One of the Guys focuses around a high school journalist student. She plans on becoming a serious journalist, going to college and being a real journalist. She writes a paper that's going to be, the paper project is one that, if winning, will be selected to be carried in an actual newspaper. There's a possibility, therefore, that it affects the future. Joyce Heiser's character writes that Terry writes such an article and does not win. She is so absolutely determined that she should have won. She's convinced that she's been held back because of her sex, being female. She hits upon a great scheme of transferring to another school, and since her name is conveniently Terry, she is able to masquerade as a boy at the other high school and submit the paper through that high school as a boy, certain that this will make the difference. It really is kind of a funny story. There, she dresses, dressing like the opposite sex, getting lessons from her brother on how to do things like scratch her private parts, and it's a little bit raunchy, but it's a very fun film. And there's a couple of unique things about the film. Obviously, there's she meets a boy, they fall in love, her previous boyfriend, who's a jerk, gets left behind. But in the middle of this, she's pretending to be a dude. So the boy that she meets at the other high school is interested in a popular girl there. Enter William Zabka, who is her jerk boyfriend at that school, and breaking up this couple to move those two people together, to get Rick and Debbie? Get them together, while at the same time that Terry really wants the guy. In the end, it's kind of not what you expect, because there is this multiple overlap. It's not as simple as the nice guy's going to get the girl, or the nice girl's going to figure out that she wants the nice guy. There's a couple of bad couples, and then there's this couple that could be a good couple, you'd think. But then, of course, Terry still ends up getting the guy, Rick, in the end, after flashing herself to reveal her gender. And the whole thing, with a lot of hilarity, ensues. And it really is. It's a very entertaining 80s movie. Of all of those sort of generic rom-coms, it's probably the one that I've watched the most, and I think it's fun. But as I said, I saw an article here recently where they were touching, how this was so forward-thinking about her gender struggles and her transvesticism and all of this. And I'm like, that's not the story. Now, did anybody think that maybe that was the story? Certainly nobody commented on it, at least not back then. That would have immediately sort of shut down any chance this movie had. It's played for humor that she pretends to be the dude, and it's never portrayed as, again, people are reading all of their current deviations and problems into the past. The movie never would have made it had it been about that. It's not about that. It's the old-fashioned, in line with the Shakespearean bed trick, the old identity swap, and in this case, the added extra of, like from Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, pretending to be the gender that you're not being played as any sort of sexual fetishism, but being played for humor for the audience. And really, the fascinating outcome of the movie is that it's very not woke, as we would apply if we were to apply today's standards. We do get a very icky kind of feeling. Any normal person gets a bit of an icky feeling when the high school male teachers are caught being overheard talking about the girls in their class and the sleazy things they wear, and that's a little bit creepy. However, by the end of the movie, what we get is that absolutely her paper was not up to snuff. See, the lesson that Terry ends up learning is not one that reaffirms her assumption of prejudice or oppression. Quite the opposite. The critique of her paper delivered and handed in as a male is essentially the same as the critique of the paper at her original high school. It wasn't about her gender. It was about the fact that the paper was not up to snuff. It had nothing to do with her sex. It was that her writing wasn't as good as she thought it was. Of course, they do give an added little extra that she writes a paper about her experience, an article about her experience living as the opposite sex and the story. And that's compelling. And that ends up being praiseworthy and prizeworthy. And she gets this sort of strange, almost apology from her teacher for underestimating her talent. But the fact remains, the subpar paper, I mean, it was good, but it just wasn't good enough. The subpar paper that she turned in originally and turned in at the other school was subpar in both places by both scoring systems, regardless of her gender. And so in the end, it ends up being a very not woke, not preachy about prejudice movie. Rather, it leaves one with the message, don't be so sure that you know why this happened. Don't be so quick to blame it on this identity or how you perceive, others perceive your identity, because it may not be correct. Sometimes it might be, but oftentimes it's not. Therefore, it becomes its own form of prejudice. This is very much there's a great message. 1985, just one of the guys, and it is driving home a message that is counter to the nonsense we're being sold now. We're being sold modern stereotypes. We're being sold modern ism archaeobias that all white people are racist. It's always about gender. It's always about race. And no, it's not. It's not. It's not. And historically, it hasn't even been that most of the time. And Just One of the Guys is one of those movies that drives home that lesson. It, at the same time, encourages young girls to shoot for the stars. It's about this young woman who has this goal, and she has the talent, but needed to refine it. She isn't good enough, but she will be, because that's how humanity works. You're not just awesome because of what you are. You work at it. She comes away learning the lesson that she was not being held back by anything but her not fully honed ability. And in the process, the real lesson is she learns to hone that talent, and then she's on her way to becoming something and someone. The sad thing at the end, though, is that poor girl that was hooked up with Rick, because clearly she's going to be out of the picture. At least she got rid of William Zabka's character. Maybe he'll come back and they'll live happily ever after in this version of the 80s universe. Who knows? But it's a fun movie. Lots of enjoyable humor, a little bit blue sometimes, so be warned. But it is really good. It's really funny, solid. 1985, Just One of the Guys. You can find it in all sorts of streaming services. I found it through Amazon. Watch it, love it. Let me know what you think.